Okay, great. Well, Brendon, thank you very much for agreeing to come on this Q&A career presentation for our kinesiology class. A little bit before we start, in our Kin Study 3 class at Evergreen, it's kind of split into thirds. The first third, we talk about being physically active, how different activities people participate in, challenges with, society being maybe a little bit sedentary and then in the middle third, we talk about biomechanics and motor skills and psychology. And then in the last part of it, we talk about different careers in kinesiology. And what I like to do is have different professionals come and basically talk to the students. And of course, you've been into our class the last 2 or 3 semesters and actually physically spoken to the students. But we also teach an online class. And there's also sometimes a student can't make it. So this is basically just a Q&A for you to talk about careers as an athletic trainer, and it'll be posted for our students to be able to hopefully listen and hear from the mouth of an athletic trainer. So with that, I just want to say thank you again for taking the time to spend some time talking to our students about athletic training. Brendon is actually works full time at Evergreen Valley College. He's been our athletic trainer here now for is it 18 months or 2 years?
Yeah, about a year and a half, 18
Yeah.
months.
And before that, he was, and he'll tell you more details. He was an athletic trainer in the professional game with the San Jose Earthquakes. With Evergreen having predominantly soccer as our main sport, it was perfect to bring in an athletic trainer who also had a specialty in soccer. And I've had the privilege of working with Brendan day in, day out now for the last 18 months and I've learned a lot. So, Brendan, if you could, I don't know if you could take over now and just kind of just introduce yourself to the class, kind of give us a little bit of background about your background and what you do as an athletic trainer and what an athletic trainer is.
All right, well, thanks for having me, Simon.
Of
So my name is
course.
Brendon Taguinod. I'm the athletic trainer here at Evergreen Valley College. So athletic training is a very kind of broad subject, but basically everything sports medicine related. It's predominantly seen in the athletic population with colleges, high schools, professional sports, et cetera. And so you're working directly with athletes, making sure that they can compete. So that's injury prevention, injury rehabilitation, and then just kind of coaching them back to fitness if there are injuries. So I work closely with the coaching staff on both men's and women's soccer with our team physician to ensure that our athletes are healthy, able to compete, able to perform, and able to do what they love to do. So it can be a very broad topic because it's everything from muscle strains, concussions, bruises, illness, uh, you know, anything kind of related to performance or what might hinder them from that. Um,
I
so
remember if you remember correctly, because we had this class a week ago, right? Is you said it's also not only now in the school settings, but you say it's also a growing position. I think you said in like the just the workplace, police, firefighting, and like even in the army or the military, right?
right, so it's often like traditional setting is kind of that sports, colleges, universities, professional sports, but it is growing. The industrial setting is a very growing kind of role for athletic trainers, which is like kind of in work sites. So in warehouses or in like construction sites. It's also growing in the military setting. So our kind of soldiers that suffer injuries and stuff, making sure that they're healthy. Like what else? Performance. So like Cirque du Soleil is a very big one, kind of that uh, world. So athletic trainers are seen in a lot of different settings now, in clinical settings, so working directly with physicians, like as a physician extender. Some work in kind of just a PT clinic as so there's a lot of different roles for athletic trainers. It's not just the traditional setting that we see anymore. So that's kind of another area that you can look into if you are interested in it.
And then can you kind of share like a bit of your kind of your background? I think you're Bay Area born, if I'm pretty sure I remember that. Where did you go to school, college? Did you do under what academic qualifications do you have to become an athletic director and sorry, athletic trainer? And what was your path?
Yeah, so I am born in the Bay Area, um, from San Jose, kind of originally. So this is home to me, and it's very, very nice, and I'm grateful to be back home and doing what I love to do. So I took a very non-traditional scenic route to athletic training. I studied language studies in undergrad, which has nothing to do with athletic training. So then when I was looking into it, I had to do a lot of prerequisite classes. Started at my journey at a community college as well, actually. Just taking some intro classes. And so your human anatomy, human physiology, kind of intro classes like that are going to be the bedrock to athletic training. Anything that we do is kind of based on human anatomy, how the body works. And then I did my graduate degree at California Baptist University in athletic training. So nowadays it's required to have a master's degree to become an athletic trainer. So there's a handful of accredited universities that offer that. So you have to go through one of their programs to be able to sit for the BOC, the Board of Certification. So to become a certified athletic trainer, that's the path nowadays. So a lot of people study kind of like an exercise science undergrad, or there might be some pre-PT stuff, but a lot of that again will be kind of heavily science-based with your human anatomy, physiology, chemistry, physics, and then maybe some intro classes to sports medicine.
When I spoke to the chiropractor,
Hmm.
physical therapist, they mentioned when they're in the latter part of their degree, they have to do like a certain number of hours, like hands-on hours in the workplace. Some point in that, because I'm thinking you learn the human anatomy, you learn the muscles, but at what point do you actually start working with real people? And is there guidance on that? So in that education, is there a certain number of hours you have to complete in like a certain setting with maybe some mentoring?
Yeah, so I think every program might be slightly different, and there might be a minimum from Katie, but I'm not sure. But yeah, so you'll start from day one basically in the program, getting hands-on experience. So your clinical rotations are very important because you will learn the actual kind of nitty-gritty of the job. You can learn as much as you can from a book, but life isn't always like a book. So you get your hands-on experience there. You find your mentors, you find people that you really like to work with or you mesh well with, and you can kind of pick and choose what they have to offer as far as learning opportunities. But yeah, I think that's the biggest aspect of that is of the kind of educational piece is getting that hands-on and getting seeing athletes and seeing injuries and seeing how people treat them and rehab them. It's really important. So you'll do your classes in the morning and then kind of go to your clinical rotations in the afternoon or evening.
Okay.
So it's a lot of work. It's like a kind of almost like a full-time job when you're in school.
My wife's a nurse, and when she went to nursing school, she would have classes in the morning. She'd have like an entire semester of, she called it clinical rotations. I mean, the word just triggered me to think about it. She had I want to say entire semester where she'd go to hospitals and she'd be working in almost getting that hands-on experience.
Yeah, it can be kind of overwhelming and intimidating at first. Like, from literally from day one, you're basically starting your clinical rotations and you don't really have any sort of that much knowledge or base knowledge, but you learn fast, right? Because and then your mentors or preceptors will kind of put you into what they feel like they think you're comfortable with or what they're comfortable with you handling. And then as you kind of go on in your education, by the end, you're kind of running the show and doing a little bit of everything.
And then once you finish a master's degree, do you have to get a certificate? I imagine you have to be like, is like a board certified or is like an athletic trainer association. So once you finish a master's degree, do you have to get like some sort of certificate or credential that says you're now an athletic trainer?
Yep. So you have to sit for the Board of Certification exam. So you take an exam, and when you pass that, then you just pay your dues, and you're a certified athletic trainer. So it's all an online kind of computer-based exam now. And then to maintain your degree or your certification, excuse me, you have to do every 2 years, you have to do 50 hours of continuing education units and maintain your sort of CPR AED certification. Other than that, you don't have to take any more exams.
What would 50 hours of continue? Could you give an example of what you've done recently for that 50 hours of continued education? Is it reading
Mhm.
books or going to workshops or is it like online courses? What
So
would,
it's a little bit of all of the above that you just mentioned. Yeah. So a big portion of the ones that I got were actually in a reporting year this year. So the biggest portion that I got was I did a PES performance certification through the National Association of Sports Medicine, which was like 25 hours in itself, right? But you can take kind of online workshops, you can go in person to workshops, you can do them through some publications. So it kind of just depends on what you're interested in. You know, there's a lot of classes like some manual therapy courses or something like that that you can go for the weekend, that you can get some units. You can do it online based. Some of them you have to pay for, some of them are free, but there's many, many
You have to stay
opportunities out
current.
there.
You have to stay current.
Yeah, you
Uh,
have to stay current. There's always, uh, research being put out every day. So trying to be up on that is key, very important.
when did you know? So we talk a lot about, you said you did language arts at one point. When did you know you wanted to be an athletic trainer? So we talk a lot in the class about kind of following your passion, right? People stumble across what they enjoy, and if you enjoy it, you typically put more into it. You become so what when did you decide, athletic training is something that kind of really interests me?
Yeah, so I was a former athlete myself, and towards the kind of end of my career, I spent more time on the table with athletic trainers getting treatment than I did on the field, it seemed like. And then just kind of talking to them, picking their brains, seeing what they did and what kind of impact they had on my life. I kind of always wanted to be connected to sport, but didn't want to go into coaching, and that it just seemed like a really good way to have an impact on athletes' lives, stay connected to sport and work with athletes. And then, be able to be outside sometimes, not stuck inside and behind a desk 9 to 5 all day, every day. So it just kind of made sense to me as I kind of went on.
So how old was you? How old was you? Like 22, 20,
I
24,
was probably
28?
probably about 32.
Okay. Yeah, so we had another one of our presenters was in the same situation where she was in her early 30s and she was still trying to carve out the journey where she is right now, but she didn't know that when she was 18 years old. So again, non-traditional journeys I think are more popular or more common. People have to work, look after family, they got to pay bills. Sometimes it can take a bit longer to kind of really know what you enjoy.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I took the scenic route to starting my career, but I'm here and I'm happy. So yeah, it all worked out.
Can you tell us like, what are your kind of your daily responsibilities? So could you, for example, today's a great day. So you're actually on the Zoom, you're actually sat two doors down from me in the building. But what does today look like for you at Evergreen Valley College? And how is that different or how does that look compared to a regular day? So how does today look? And how does a regular day look?
Yeah. So today's a little bit different. So I showed up. The women's team is away for a playoff game, so I got here early to make sure that they needed anything. I was here for them. Pack their medical kit, send them off, wish them luck, and then get dragged into a Zoom meeting with the men's coach. And then we have another match. The men are hosting another playoff match tonight. So then just setting up the field, getting ready, doing any sort of pregame treatments with our guys, taping them, and then potentially taping and doing any sort of treatments with the other team if they don't send their athletic trainer. But every day can kind of be a little bit different, right? It depends on if we're just having training or practices or if there's a match that day. Um, you never know what's going to walk in through the door every day is kind of a mystery. Somebody could come in with, a dislocated finger or a blister or a strained hamstring or potential concussion. So you kind of have to just be on your toes, right? And like I said, I enjoy being able to get outside, see actual training sometimes, but every day it's kind of making sure before training, doing any sort of treatments, taping, making sure that people can do their thing and train, or if they need to be held out, talking to their coaches on what their status might be like, if they're limited, if they can do this, that. Um, and then after training kind of treatments too, um, whatever that entails. So
So if we touch talk on prehab, right? So prehab,
mhm.
you said taping. Of course, I see it all the time, but what other things it entailed in prehab?
Yeah, so pre-op is usually going to be like some sort of a little bit of warm up. Maybe it's on the bike, a little bit of foam rolling, kind of loosen up some muscles, get some blood flowing, and then a little activation if that's band work, kind of glute activation or some stretching, some mobility stuff, just maybe targeting specific muscle groups that they're having issues with. Um, so it kind of really depends on what the actual injury is, but a lot of it's going to be similar.
And is that all is that all athletes, or is that athletes that are kind of on a plan with you, where they're coming to you to say, "Hey, Brendan, I feel a bit tight here," or I need. It's not everyone's not coming to you, right? It's more.
Yeah, not everybody's going to come in. I mean, obviously the door is going to be always be open to everybody and anybody, but usually it's going to be people that have ongoing issues that kind of have their plans already in place and they kind of know the routines to do. There's days when I will be able to get out on the field and do kind of an activation kind of injury prevention program with the whole team, and I've tried to make that happen um, as often as I can. Sometimes it's not always doable, but I think it's important that everybody is kind of knows that plan and is doing it and participating.
And then, of course, after training, it can be icing and or like a massage or a stretching or some sort of thing. Uh, what are the most common injuries that you see from athletes? Of course, and the fact that we're kind of a soccer school, does that mean that most injuries are kind of the same? And would that be different for a bigger school where an athlete had maybe multiple sports?
Yeah, so here typically, I mean, the most common thing that we are seeing is ankle sprains. It's very common in your soccers, your basketballs, and your footballs. Like I think ankle sprain is by far the number one injury in that. A lot of times, in football, you'll see some knee injuries, lots of knee injuries, and then some common. I think we've done a much better job with it recently, but for a long time, hamstring strains in soccer, especially and high speed running sports, was very prevalent. But there's really good research on how to prevent those now, so it shouldn't be that hard to prevent, really.
So if we
Um,
touch on, if we go from hamstrings, then how do you, and this is a question I've had with you multiple times, even off here, how do you tell, like, I get the idea, if I broke my finger and my finger's hanging at 90 degrees, we all know it's a broken finger. And from your expertise, what intrigues me is how you can tell how do you test how badly someone's hurt their hamstring? So if I come and say, hey, Brandon, I've really hurt my hamstring, what would be the two or three things that you would do to be able to diagnose how badly I'd hurt it? Because by diagnosing it, you would then give me some sort of treatment or kind of a path to recovery. So how do you diagnose like a hamstring injury that you can't physically see?
yeah, so first and foremost, you kind of go through a history. So what happened? How did it happen? You can get a lot of information just on that alone by understanding the mechanism of injury. So then that's all injuries that you kind of evaluate. And then second, you're just kind of doing your strength testing and your range of motion testing will give you a very, very good idea of where they're at, how significant it is, if it's grade one, grade two, grade three strain. Um, if they can't even move it at all, you're looking at a grade three for sure, but it could be obviously grade two is a very kind of broad, big range, but yeah, the strength tests and your range of motion tests really kind of give you those key indicators of where they're at.
And then when you start treatment with an athlete, you hope that you see a improvement from a three down to a two, down to a one, and then you start as they recover, and then you start working with them on their own individual plan, which will then ultimately see them integrated back into their team practice. How it works.
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, those strength and the range of motion are kind of the two things that we can really observe, and those are the two things that we're going to measure along the the kind of the return to play protocol. So are they getting stronger? Is their range of motion improving, and is it comparable to their non-involved side? So it should be pretty much equal to their other limb. And then through that process, right, they're going to return to their running, potentially like a limited on the field rehab stuff, and then eventually back onto the field.
And then I would imagine that kind of collaboration teamwork, communication, right? Because you have to work with the athlete, you have to work with the coaches, right? So often you're the one that, again, you mentioned earlier, you'll send me a report usually early in the day or mid afternoons who you've been working with. Then the end of the day, you'll typically send another report saying, this is the state of all the players. These players are out. These players are on, limited activity, and these players are on, these everyone else is fine. But can you give us like an example of how you have to collaborate and you have to work with coaches and even doctors and athletes to keep everyone on the same page?
Yeah, so I mean I think it's important to like kind of really spell out to athletes what their limitations are. Sometimes it's very obvious to them, but sometimes it's not. You know, athletes want to perform and they want to compete and they want to be out there. So um, sometimes we have to convince them that they're really not ready when we know that they're not. And then um, having a good relationship with the athletes helps. Having a really good relationship with the coaches helps because they understand where you're coming from. Because um, at the end of the day, everybody wants to win. We're all on the same team, but my role on the team would be kind of making sure that they're healthy. And then, the team physician is always going to have the final word. So you have to have a very good relationship with them too, because sometimes you can work, the sports medicine doctors are very much easier to work with than like kind of your traditional primary care physicians because they understand sport a lot better in that regard, and they understand the athletic trainer's role as well. And then just sitting down with athletes and kind of having some goals like short-term goals, medium-term goals, long-term goals if it's going to be a longer term rehab, so that they can kind of see it maybe on a calendar and see what kind of metrics and goals that they need to hit to get to the ultimate being back on the field.
The team physician is kind of the sports doctor, right? That's the doctor that if someone had an injury that needed some sort of additional care or even a surgery, that you'd then send or send to go have further checkups and further treatment. Is that correct? And you said that person coming from a sporting background or having a sporting context helps when an athlete walks in for treatment.
Right. Yeah. So I think it's really important to have a relationship with the sports medicine trained physician that does understand kind of how important uh, it is being an athlete and the team physician's role in their care. But yeah, so having a team physician that you can kind of, send a text message to saying, hey, I need you to see so and so today or tomorrow, and they can get them in, get them their imaging if they need to, like an X-ray, an MRI, and then potentially referring them to any specialist if they are not that specialist. Um, so having that kind of circle of care is really important so that you can kind of get things done a lot quicker than your traditional like kind of medicine path.
So, for example, someone hurts their ankle and you might say, hey, you need to go get this checked out, go get some x-rays. They
Right.
get their x-rays, hopefully they get cleared of no, there's nothing in there broken.
Right.
Back to you then to start strengthening, balancing, clearing out anything you can clear with massages, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Essentially, yes.
Um, Now, one of the questions, what are concussions? So concussions is the other one that is when I spring to mind, like how that's you mentioned earlier about kind of ongoing education and new literature always being published. What's the latest now with concussions? If someone came to you with symptoms of a concussion, you're ultimately in charge. In fact, if I remember correctly, one of the female players wasn't eligible to play in a game last week because she hadn't returned to play from a concussion yet. So what's the protocol if someone gets a concussion, um, in terms of how they come back? Because again, in that case, you have to bear the bad news to the coach, right? Because last year you had to tell me that we couldn't have a player back, and I wasn't for. I was eager to have that player back, but you had to be firm to say no. He or she hasn't passed the level of clearance yet to be eligible to play. So how does a concussion return to play? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, so concussion is very kind of hot topic, especially now in sport, because of the importance of the brain and the body, right? And we only get one brain. You can't really do surgery or replacement like you can on an ankle or a knee or shoulder. So it's important to correctly diagnose it first and foremost. But um, kind of. the new literature shows that you don't need to be in a dark room resting the whole time for 48 hours or whatever until you're asymptomatic. That it actually shows that that early um, limited exercise, like a little walk or a little bike ride, is more beneficial, even if it does provoke a few symptoms. In the long run, it is showing that it's leading to quicker resolution of symptoms, which is what we're looking for. And then just realizing and understanding that no two concussions are alike, even within the same athlete. If they've had one before, it might be completely different this time around. There's different kind of systems and in the brain that could be affected, whether it's balance, ocular motor, emotional. There's different areas of the brain that could be affected by it. And then kind of realizing that, potentially doing some exercises that can help with that along the way. But essentially, it's just kind of early movement, some rest, some mental rest. Um, but in the long run, it's just as soon as they're asymptomatic, kind of gradually progressing them through a return to play and some specific movements that they might be doing. But every day, you kind of have to do a little bit more and waiting till and then recheck every other
So
day.
there's not one like one glove fits all, right? There's not one. But you're talking if you have a concussion, you can be out for minimum 3 to 4 days. Minimum.
Minimum, yeah. So a lot of concussions, I'm not gonna say, I don't know about most. It's
Yeah.
hard to say, kind of put everything in that umbrella, but a lot of concussions kind of resolve within 7 days with symptomatically, right? And then it might be another 4 or 5 days of your gradual return to play progression. But um, the return to play that we typically work with is about 4 to 5 days of doing something a little bit more every day with making sure that there's no symptoms that come up within those days, right? So even if you're resolved within one day, then it's another 4 or 5 days um,
Before you're
return.
cleared. If we shift gears a bit, what are the main rewards or the main positives from your job? Why do you enjoy what you do? Why do you find what you do? You said, oh, I was a bit late when I found it, but I found it, and you're here and you like it. What are the biggest rewards or positives of being an athletic trainer?
Yeah, I mean, I think just being an athlete myself, it was, one of the best experiences of my life and just being able to do what I love to do. So having that kind of impact on athletes' lives and seeing them compete and do what they love to do and whatever role that you have to get them there, especially if it's from like a long-term injury or surgery, it's incredibly rewarding, to see somebody score a goal like after you've been working with them for the last 2 months or whatever. It's pretty special. And um, it can be kind of like a thankless job at times, but I know why I'm doing it, so that's kind of what matters to me. But yeah, it's really pretty special to be part of a team and have like kind of a different role in a team than in your coach or what have you. But
But make a difference, right? You kind of
yeah,
really get to see. So you have a athlete now that's on his way back from like a 1 year knee surgery, right? And hopefully in a year's time, all your hard work will pay off when you see the smile on his face. Hopefully, when he's
yeah.
back on the field doing what he enjoys, right? But that'll take a year of your time to get him there, or close to a year.
Yeah, and those can be very challenging times, right? Because you will potentially hit hiccups. It can be very frustrating for clinicians, for athletes, because will plateau at times. So it's hard to kind of see the bigger picture. But like I said, it's having those kind of short term, medium term, and long term goals in mind and in play that you know that you're continuing to prove and you're going to hit those marks along the way. But at the end of those long 1 year recoveries, it's that much more special to have to see
Mhm.
somebody succeed.
So then, what are the main challenges of the job? How about like, is there a good? Do you get a good work-life balance? Like, I know you'll be here tonight until 9 o'clock, I bet, before you go home. Like, do you work on weekends? Like, what are the main challenges you find to? I tell people the grass is not always perfectly green, right? So, are there any challenges to the role that you find, or
Yeah, so traditional sports settings are typically going to be nights. You're working nights for games. You potentially have to work weekends for games. like potentially have to travel overnight, what have you. So it can be long work weeks with little time off, 6 days a week, 7 days a week potentially, in a lot of traditional settings. I'm fairly lucky here that I'm basically Monday through Friday, with the occasional weekend games when we do make the playoffs. But I think that's something that you have to really understand going if you're interested or going into the profession, that the hours can be tough, because that's your sports work that way. They play night games or they play weekend games.
It's reasonably unsocial hours, correct? It can,
Very much so. Yeah. Yeah.
and also you spend all your time working with students. Because again, in a typical work setting, you get to interact with colleagues, and they're usually other adults. The reality is,
Right.
in my world as a coach and your world as an athletic trainer, or even as a teacher, you're spending most of your time with kids, right? It's a different conversation than if you're working with your peers.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, I think in this setting too, like, we have kind of young minds that we can mold and have a very big impact and influence on, which I think is a good thing.
What are the essential skills then? So you've mentioned one thing. You kind of mentioned them in terms of like working with someone who's going to have ups and downs. Like again, you're going to probably work with these athletes, probably their worst time, right? They come into you because they're hurt. So I imagine having empathy. Empathy would be important because you have to be there to listen and to help and to guide them and be. What essential skills do you think an athletic trainer has to have?
Yeah, I think I have answered this differently every time you ask me, but patience, I think really have to be patient, because you are dealing with um, potentially 30, 40, 50 different personalities and people and how they work, and you have to understand that schedules are changing constantly. You're typically the first one to arrive and the last one to leave. But also like just kind of selflessness, like because it's kind of a service role where you're serving the athletic population, and doing you're giving a lot for them to be able to do what they do. And sometimes like I said, it can be very thankless at times, but it's a very underappreciated role at times. But I think, you can't really have athletics without it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but those are a couple things that I can think of.
No, I think didn't mention to you, but after class last week, because you were a guest presenter in our class last week, one of the students actually came up to me and said, having met you, he's now more interested in wanting to be an athletic trainer. And he
Mm,
said it was a selfish, not being selfish, selflessness. He said he
yeah,
also doesn't like to be. He was telling me, look, I'm not overly outgoing. I'm not kind of an alpha male, and I was like, well, actually, Brendan's not. But actually, he's actually quite a quiet person. He doesn't really even like presenting that much. So, but he's approachable. Like his personality works really well in that he doesn't try to dominate every conversation. He's a good listener, and sometimes that's what athletes want because athletes by default want to talk and want to be the center of attention. And sometimes having the personality where you're a lot more, you're okay being not in the background and negative, but you're okay being, hey, okay, you talk, I'll listen, and I'll give you my advice when needed. I don't need to dominate every conversation. One of the students last week noticed that in your personality and is more interested in following the career because he realized, you know what, I like to listen. I'm very empathetic. I can be patient. If I've got the knowledge, I think I can, but I don't like, he doesn't love meeting new people. And I
yeah,
explained to him, hey, you don't, that can be a good skill. It can be a good skill to be a good listener um, and to be willing to kind of serve versus always dominate.
that's great.
Yeah, maybe that's a good one. What about advice then? Any advice for, so if we have students in the class that are interested in pursuing a career in athletic training, what would you advise them to do between now and their undergrad and as they graduate? Is there any work experience or things they should be reading or keeping current on or people they should be contacting?
Yeah, I think try to contact athletic trainers and pick their brains. I think try to get some like job shadow opportunities where that you're actually seeing it firsthand and what it really entails. when, some of these athletic trainers have a couple hundred athletes that they're dealing with. It makes for long, long days, and that could be a reality of a new grad going into the profession. Um, but yeah, I think you really have to see it firsthand, kind of experience it to understand what goes into it, what the hours look like, what it entails, because it can be kind of a glamorous thing when you see it from the outside, you know. Um, like professional sports seems like a glamorous place to work until you're working 42 days in a row, something like that.
See, there are challenges. You should have mentioned this in the challenges section.
But yeah,
Are you allowed to have people shadow you? I guess that was the next question. If someone said, "Hey, Brendan, could I come out for a couple of days and just watch what you do?" Because I think one was like, "No, you don't really get many shadowing opportunities." Are athletic trainers usually open to a student just coming along and observing for a day or a couple of days? I know you've had one in the past. You had one maybe 6 months
yeah,
ago.
last
You had a
spring.
young
Yeah, I
guy.
think I'm open to it. I think a lot of there's some schools that are kind of more set up that actually teach classes and have kind of class opportunities where they um, shadow and actually kind of get like kind of more hands-on experience and they're helping out in the athletic training room. Unfortunately, we don't have anything that formal, but I think I would be open to having, some job shadow opportunities.
And then what about career growth, or where would you move when once you're an athletic trainer? Where do you move on? Like, what's the end game for Is it to work in a professional environment? Because you can't really open your own practice, right? So, or could you open a practice where you have athletic trainers work for you, or is it once you get into a setting that you thoroughly enjoy, that is kind of that's where you settle, that's where you're done? What, or is it you go, you take a few more classes and you become the team physician? What's next for someone once you're an athletic trainer?
Yeah, I think that's very kind of dependent on the person. Obviously there's people that are lifers that have been doing it for, 20, 30 years. Burnout can be very real in this profession though. I will say that because the hours that I mentioned, the expectations are very high. Um, but I mean, you could go into administration potentially. Like there's quite a few athletic directors in the community college that are former athletic trainers. You could go into like medical device sales, which I've heard of a lot of people doing. Potentially working for like potentially going back to school and becoming a physician assistant, which is a little bit less schooling than an actual medical doctor, but a very similar kind of
Yeah.
role. Um, what else? There have been some people that kind of open their own thing, that have their own company. Um, but it,
It's less common.
it is less common. I think it's a lot harder just because, we can't really bill for insurance like physical therapists or chiropractors. So it can be a little bit tougher just payment wise. But it really just kind of depends on what area of interest you want to go into. If you want to pursue like a CSCS and do more like the kind of strength and conditioning route, um, there are opportunities for you for sure. It just kind of depends on what
Yeah.
interests you the most.
Or again, you can just find a setting that you enjoy and you can be competent and comfortable in that setting, right?
Right. Or you could go and, to get a doctorate and teach athletic training. Um, it just kind of depends.
Yeah. And then just finally, kind of we kind of spoke about your background, education, what athletic do. We spoke about prehab, and then of course rehabilitation afterwards. And we spoke about a couple of injuries that you can't even see, things like concussions and or muscle injuries. Of course, essential skills and some positives and challenges and some career growth. Any kind of closing reflections from you for the class or any last minute words of wisdom?
Um, no, I think it's like I said, it's a pretty unique role in that it's not just one thing that we do. Every day is a little bit different. I kind of describe it as a mix between an EMT and a physical therapist. But there's times where you kind of have to be a team psychologist as well and just sit and listen to some people that are dealing with whatever life brings them. so you have a very, very kind of broad role, but again, it's incredibly rewarding. And but it is important to understand the challenges that go with it because it's not all the grass isn't always the greenest on this side. But um,
Yeah, it's like I say about every career. Every career
I
is going
think
to some challenge somewhere.
absolutely, I think
Yeah.
everything does have its challenges, but just really understanding what it entails, and then just kind of going for it, you know. I was very fortunate and lucky along my path, getting into the professional setting, and I think that was just like a great setting for me and learned a ton and um, kind of put me on the path to become here. Um, but yeah, I think
Well,
you find
nice.
your
Well,
passion
what
and
I'll
you go
do
for
is
it.
when I share this video, there'll also be your contact details here at Evergreen. So I will encourage students if they've got questions that maybe weren't answered or they do know they've got a real interest in athletics. And Brendon works for Evergreen Valley College. His office is here on campus. So maybe if they reach out to you and they set up a time to maybe give you a call or come and say hi, then if you're open to kind of giving answering a couple more questions or just being, I think a couple of students came and met with you after class last week, right?
Yeah,
Just for a short conversation. And it's always nice when there's a resource here for people who need it.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, but anyway, it's much appreciated. We really appreciate the time you took today to kind of talk to us about athletic training. Um, and yeah, we're very much appreciative of you sharing all your knowledge and wisdom with us.
Thanks, Simon.
Okay, thanks, Brendan.
Okay.
Bye.